Welcome to day 13 of Hammerween and to the end of weekend 2 of Vampire Weekends. We're going to be looking at 1970s, December 1970s, Countess Dracula, which again stars Ingrid Pitt. So, straight in with plot synopsis this time, no preamble. Based pretty much on the life and times of Elizabeth Elizabeth Bathory, the rather infamous figure of history who, whether or not you want to believe the stories, did indeed bathe in the blood of virgins, or was it political propaganda? Well, in this film, it's a Hammer horror, so of course she actually does use blood to keep herself eternally young. So, first of all, that's the different type of vampirism we have here. We don't have fangs, we don't have biting of necks, but what we do have is using blood of the innocent to bring eternal youth, essentially. So, not too dissimilar to the vampire in all but name, really. So, Ingrid Pitt, of course, plays the Countess herself, slightly renamed as Elizabeth Nasasti. Nasasti. It's a Hungarian pronunciation, of which I'm not terribly adept, I'm afraid. But Ingrid Pitt plays her, and we kick off at her husband's funeral. Ingrid Pitt's an old woman. What's going on here? Well, very quickly, we established that um, she wasn't too cut up about her husband's death because she's actually been having an affair with Captain Dobie, who's the kind of steward of the castle, played by Nigel Green, sadly in one of his last roles before it looks like he took his own life. Some say it was accidental, but the evidence points to an intentional overdose. So Nigel Green, the great Nigel Green, people will remember him from Jason and the Argonauts and whatnot. He very much is saying, well, your husband's out of the way now. We can have the life that we wanted to have, blah, 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 blah. She's not terribly happy about this, though. There's something still sticking in her craw. She gets into an argument with one of her servant girls and she smacks the servant girl, inadvertently causing the girl to bleed. Some of the blood gets onto uh, Elizabeth, and wouldn't you know, that part of her skin becomes young. So she says to Captain Dobby, "Do you think you could? Do you think you could bring that girl here, drain her of her blood, and I'll just have a bath in it?" And he says, as any willing partner would, really, you have to be supportive in a relationship. Sure, why not? Sounds like a plan. But here's where things start to go awry. You know, we couldn't have a nice happy ending for the vampire 10 minutes in. Her husband had a great friend who was an army officer, and that army officer's son, um, played by Sandor Elias, has come into town and has part of the inheritance as part of the kind of extended family, if you like. Family who aren't really family, but we owe them a blood debt kind of thing. So he's here, Lieutenant Roth, and he falls in love with this beautiful young woman who is Countess Elonia, the daughter of Ingrid Pitt's Countess Elizabeth. You can work out the twist there, can you? Again, it's very early on, so I don't need to cover it too much. That is Ingrid Pitt's character. She has de-aged herself with the blood of virgins, and she's posing as her own daughter to fool people so that there's not too many questions as to why she's suddenly de-aged about 40 years. So she starts to have an affair with this young man, pretending she's her own daughter. And there are quite a few creepy moments where she calls him my son as the old woman when the serum, the blood wears off. Because there's a kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing where it only lasts a certain amount of time. But she also calls him my son as the daughter as well. So there's a very creepy, incestuous vibe going on here as well. What also underpins it is a very fairy tale like feel. I mean, essentially, it's called Countess Dracula, which Elizabeth Bathory was in real life, was one of her nicknames, but it could quite easily be called Crazy Cinderella because she gets to go to the ball with Prince Charming, but at midnight the effects wear off and she'll turn back to the way she was before. Blah blah blah. So there's a very fairy tale like vibe for this film in particular. As the plot develops, of course, more things get thrown in the way. In a Jekyll and Hyde fashion, again, the blood mixture stops working quite as potently. She starts to become more aged as she returns to her original self. And Morris Denham as the Grand Master, the old kind of wizard, if you like, of the castle, he starts to take an interest in affairs as well, starts noticing what's going on between Ingrid Pitt and Nigel Green, starts noticing the young virgins that have gone missing, and starts to notice that a certain book about blood incantations has been removed from the shelf. So he launches his investigation. From then on, again, this is one of those films I'm not going to go into the spoilers of the third act because once more it's an underseen Hammer and it does go in a few places that I think are pretty damn interesting. So it's directed by the great Peter Sasti. Look up his CV if you haven't done. He's directed some really good Hammers, but also directed The Stone Tape, written by Nigel Neal, which has just been announced as coming on Blu-ray, which you will 100% get a Blu-ray review of that when that lands in December from 101 Films. So that's pretty much the plot then. And I'm sure you can fill in a lot of the blanks from where I left it there. What's going to happen with the illicit affair. The real daughter, played by Leslie Ann Down, is being held prisoner in the woods. Again, a very fairy tale like thing. Like, was it Snow White that was held prisoner in the woods by the huntsman? I don't know. Probably. But that adds a fairy tale aspect to it as well. So the real daughter is out there. How can Elizabeth maintain this facade indefinitely? Because she actually does want to marry young Lieutenant Toth. But how can Nigel Green get his way because he's still in love with the old version of Ingrid Pitt and he wants her to stop using it, but he's facilitating the death of virgins to make sure that his love gets what she wants anyway. So quite a bit of in-depth, messed up family affair stuff here. Jerry Springer would have a field day in Countess Dracula, but again with a very, I don't want to call it folk horror. It's much more fairy tale type vibe on top, but it is still very much a Hammer horror. There's some horrific ideas going on here, not just in terms of the incest, but in the treatment of young women. The peasants are treated as such. They are regarded as subhuman. It doesn't matter if we bump them off, they're not like us. So there's a real commentary on class system as well. It's pretty great stuff from top to bottom. I've got a major problem though, and it's a problem that the leading lady shared with me. Ms. Ingrid Pitt, who we praised to the hilt yesterday, she's dubbed here by Olive Gregg for no real reason. Ingrid Pitt had a wonderful, wonderful voice. It would have lent itself perfectly to the Countess. So there's no reason for the dubbing to take place. She fought that corner, was dubbed anyway, and then refused to work for Hammer thereafter. Their loss because frankly she was knocking them out the park. And we'll see more of Ingrid Pitt in a couple of, well, next week's installments of Vampire Weekend. We should see a return for her, I believe. So, really to sum up, it's not a complicated film. It's a well structured film. It's a well paced film. It's a little bit slow, but that's intentional because it does have, again, that Grimm Brothers feel of, setting up a tone, which you know is going to have a chilling payoff. So there is a kind of melancholy vibe to it, a very European vibe, which infiltrates the film. And Peter Sass's direction is wonderful. It's patient, but it's decadent. He pays wonderful attention to even the peasantry sets and whatnot. He shoots them as if he's shooting wonderful castles. There's some gorgeous location work here. There's some great matte work. There's a wonderful score by, was it James Robinson who did this one? I should have looked this up beforehand. Uh, Harry Robinson. Wonderful score, which gives it a creepy vibe, but also a magisterial vibe. So he picks up on the kind of Jekyll and Hyde connotations of the main character, Countess Dracula, and gives her distinct themes, whether she's young or old. But instead of just having it be, I'm young, so it's a happy theme, I'm old, so it's a sad theme, he kind of has it as a commentary on her character. So the music feels sad for her even when she's young and now beautiful, there's still a bit of melancholy in the music to say she's living a lie. And don't forget, to facilitate this happiness, she's murdering virgins and bathing in their blood. Which, hmm. So some people will feel taken advantage of because this isn't a traditional vampire film. I think Hammer have done so many of those that it's fine to take something a bit different. Of course, they called it Dracula because that's going to sell more tickets. But again, the real life Elizabeth Bathory was called Countess Dracula. So you can call that a technicality if you want. I think it's perfectly valid that they used the name. So. mm. And again, the cast, Leslie Ann Down is wonderful as the trap daughter. I love her anyway, upstairs, downstairs. She's great. You're really desperate for her to break free from her captor. Peter Jeffrey's got a good role as a bailiff in here. Modest Denham, a little bit cartoonish as the scribe of the castle. He's got the big old fake beard and whatnot, but it's Modest Denham, so he plays him well. Nigel Green steals the show for me. He's phenomenal as Captain Dobie. Completely makes you understand why he would murder virgins for this woman. He adores her. He's adored her for years. And even though she's now not interested in him because she thinks she can do better now that she can get young and pretty once more, he still has a devotion to her. So he has to be able to fill that, to convince you that he would feel that way. And he does. It's a wonderfully layered, balanced performance. But he also needs to convince you that he's kind of leading her down that path so that things go wrong and she'll come back to him. Even though ultimately it's a Hammer film, we know they're all leading to their doom, really, for what they're doing. You don't get away with this sort of behavior, murdering virgins. And again, Ingrid Pitt. Ingrid Pitt's just phenomenal in both roles. The old crone version of Countess Elizabeth, but she is effervescent as the young version. She knows how to really perk it up to sell you on not just that she's joyous, but the particular joy because she's now so used to being a decrepit old woman. It's a wonderful performance from Ingrid Pitt, and I wish that they'd used her voice because not only would it have solidified the performance further, but it would have kept Ingrid Pitt happy, and we could have had her in more Hammer films. Their loss, but ultimately our loss. Well, I think we'll call it there, folks. Hope you have enjoyed Vampire Weekend 2. Join me next weekend for Vampire Weekend 3, funnily enough. We'll continue on with the Karnstein trilogy. I think we'll do Lust for a Vampire next. But tomorrow, because it's been requested by some really good supporters, we're going to do Shadow of the Cat. So, Shadow of the Cat tomorrow, and as you know, Tuesdays are devoted to Nigel Neal, so Quatermass in the Pit on Tuesday. So, a couple of biggies coming up. I'll see you then. Folks, take care of yourselves.